The headline detonated across Declan Pierce's phone screen at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, the kind of cold February dawn when even the radiators in Brooklyn surrendered to winter. He stood motionless in his kitchen, a spatula dripping scrambled eggs onto linoleum that had been beige once, maybe decades ago, staring at words that refused to make sense no matter how many times his eyes tracked across them. Billionaire. CEO Cordelia Thorne's secret affair with struggling waiter. Love or exploitation? The photograph beneath showed him unmistakably, him same threadbare jacket he wore every day because it was the only one he owned, walking out of a glass tower in Tribeca at 12 minutes past midnight. The image quality was professional telephoto lens, sharp enough to capture the exhaustion around his eyes, the way his shoulders hunched against wind that cut through fabric too thin for late-night February streets. His phone began vibrating before he could process the implications. 17 missed calls materialized in the notification bar. 23 text messages. His Instagram dormant for months because social media required energy he didn't possess erupted with follow requests and comments from strangers whose profile pictures blurred into an accusatory mob. The eggs in the pan behind him began smoking. Jasper, 5 years old and still wearing pajamas with superheroes whose names he recited like prayers, looked up from his cereal with eyes too observant for a child who should have been protected from mornings like this. "Daddy, your phone is loud." Declan silenced it without looking away from the screen, his thumb moving on autopilot while his brain tried to catch up with a reality that had shifted beneath him like ice cracking on a lake he hadn't known he was crossing. The article beneath the photograph spun a narrative he didn't recognize. Secret romance midnight rendezvous, substantial financial compensation for reasons that remain unclear. Every sentence felt like a fist. "I know, buddy. Eat your breakfast." He scrolled. More photographs emerged, each one a fragment of his life, rearranged into something unrecognizable. Him pouring coffee at Aurelius, the upscale Manhattan restaurant where he worked breakfast shifts because the tips were better than anywhere else in the city, and the schedule let him drop Jasper at school first. Cordelia Thorne sitting across from him in the private dining room, her expression caught mid-smile, the kind of natural warmth that never appeared in Forbes magazine profiles, but that he'd seen exactly 6 times over 6 Thursday mornings when she requested him as her server. Another photograph showed them through the restaurant window, the angle suggesting intimacy that hadn't existed. She'd been leaning forward to hear him over the ambient noise, asking a question about whether he was happy with his life, and he'd answered honestly because something about the way she asked made lying feel impossible. His coworker from the delivery service had texted, "Dude, is this really you?" The link in the message led to the same article already spreading across platforms he didn't use, shared by people who'd never met him, but had opinions about his choices, his desperation, his willingness to exploit or be exploited, depending on which comment thread you believed. Declan's hands went numb. The phone clattered onto the counter. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. But the smell of burning eggs and Jasper's increasingly worried glances confirmed that reality had indeed split open, spilling his private life across the internet for public consumption and judgment. The phone rang again. Claire Montgomery, his floor manager at Aurelius, her name flashing across the screen with the kind of urgency that preceded catastrophe. He answered. "Declan, where are you right now?" Her Scottish accent, usually softened by years in New York, cut sharp with stress. "Home." "Why?" "Don't come in today. Actually, don't come in at all. You're suspended pending investigation." The words landed without inflection, delivered fast like she'd practiced them, like she'd been waiting for his call so she could get this over with and move on to the next crisis. "Investigation." "Claire, what?" "There are reporters outside the restaurant asking questions about you and Cordelia Thorne. The owner is losing his mind." "Did you really not think this would become a problem?" Anger cut through the shock sharp enough to make his voice steady. "I was working. I was serving food at private dinners she hired me for. That's it." "Well, it doesn't look like that's it. I have to go. Don't contact anyone from the restaurant until you hear from HR." The line went dead. Declan stood in his kitchen, 400 square feet, that served as bedroom, living room, dining room, and constant reminder of how far he'd fallen since the teaching career he'd loved, and tried to remember how to breathe. The radiator clanked. Jasper's spoon scraped against his bowl. Outside, the city woke up to a Tuesday that would be ordinary for everyone except Declan Pierce, whose face was currently being dissected by strangers who knew nothing about medical debt or widowhood or the arithmetic of survival. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered without thinking, some part of his brain still operating on the assumption that the world made sense, that people called with reasonable requests. "Is this Declan Pierce?" A woman's voice, professional and sharp as new scissors. "Who's asking?" "Rebecca Winters from the Metro Daily. I'm doing a story on your relationship with Cordelia Thorne and was hoping to get your side of things. Can you confirm you've been regularly visiting her penthouse? What is the nature of your relationship? Have you received money or gifts from Ms. Thorne?" Declan hung up. The phone rang immediately. Different number. He declined. Another call. Then another. Jasper had stopped eating. The boy stared at his father with an expression Declan recognized from the year Emily died, when 5-year-old comprehension couldn't grasp cancer, but understood perfectly well that something terrible was happening to the shape of their family. "Daddy, who keeps calling you?" "Nobody, buddy. Finish your breakfast, okay? We need to get you to school." 20 minutes later, they stepped out of the building into a gauntlet Declan hadn't anticipated. Two men with cameras positioned like they'd been waiting raised their equipment the moment he appeared on the sidewalk. "Mr. Pierce, can you comment on your relationship with Cordelia Thorne? How long have you been seeing her? Is it true she's paying you?" The questions came rapid-fire, overlapping, designed to provoke reaction. Declan grabbed Jasper's hand and walked faster, his heart hammering against ribs that suddenly felt too tight for his chest. The photographers followed their footsteps, loud on pavement, still slick with last night's rain. Jasper looked around, confused and frightened, not understanding why strangers were shouting at his father, why cameras clicked like insects, why the walk to the bus stop had transformed into something that required running. "Daddy, why are they taking pictures of us?" They reached the corner. The school bus idled half a block away, exhaust billowing white in the cold air. Declan knelt, blocking the photographers with his body, and gripped his son's shoulders with hands that shook despite his best efforts at steadiness. "Listen to me, Jasper. Some people are going to be asking weird questions for a little while. If anyone approaches you at school, you don't talk to them. You go find your teacher immediately. Understand?" Jasper's eyes, the same gray as Emily's, searched his father's face for reassurance that Declan couldn't provide. "Why are they taking pictures of us?" "Because they're confused about something and they think I can help them. But it's nothing bad, okay? Everything's fine." The lie tasted like ash. Nothing was fine. Everything was the opposite of fine. But Jasper was 5 years old and didn't need to carry his father's panic like a coat that didn't fit. The bus doors hissed open. Declan hugged his son tight enough to feel the small ribcage expand and contract, kissed the top of his head where hair stuck up in a cowlick that never stayed down no matter how much Declan smoothed it each morning, and watched Jasper climb the steps with backward glances that broke something in Declan's chest. As the bus pulled away, belching diesel and carrying his son toward a school day that would probably include questions Jasper couldn't answer, Declan turned to face the photographers who'd followed him down the block like predators tracking wounded prey. "I have nothing to say. Please leave me alone." "Just a few questions, Mr. Pierce." "No." He walked back to his building, ignoring the shouted questions, taking the stairs 2 at a time because the elevator had been broken for a month and the landlord kept promising repairs that never materialized. Inside his apartment, he locked the door, leaned against it, and tried to think through the static filling his skull. This was insane. He'd served food at some dinners. He'd been polite and professional. Cordelia had tipped generously, but generosity wasn't illegal. There was no relationship beyond employer and employee, no secret affair, no exploitation in either direction. Why was this a story? But even as the question formed, he knew the answer. Cordelia Thorne was one of the most powerful women in New York, a self-made billionaire who'd built Thorne Industries from nothing after her father's real estate company collapsed when she was 22. And Declan Pierce was nobody, a widower with debt that would outlive him, working multiple jobs to keep his son fed and housed, the kind of person who existed in the background of other people's lives without ever becoming the main character in his own. The optics were bad, even though nothing bad had happened. And the internet loved a scandal, especially one that suggested a wealthy woman might be getting exploited by a desperate man or vice versa, depending on which narrative fed your existing biases about class and power and the gap between people who had everything and people who had nothing. Declan turned his phone back on. Bad idea. Worse than bad. The notifications had multiplied like bacteria. He opened his laptop, a machine so old it wheezed during startup, and searched his own name immediately, regretting the decision. Dozens of articles, blog posts, social media threads, comment sections that metastasized into cesspools of judgment delivered by strangers who'd never met him but had strong opinions about his character, his motives, his fitness as a father. Obviously a gold digger. She's lonely and he's taking advantage. What kind of man uses a billionaire for money? This is what happens when people get desperate. Someone had found his teaching certification and was speculating about why he'd left the profession. Someone else had discovered Emily's obituary and twisted it into a sob story he was supposedly using to manipulate Cordelia. And there were photographs of Jasper, his son, 5 years old and identifiable, with captions questioning what kind of father would put his child in this situation. Declan closed the laptop before his fist went through the screen. The landline rang. He'd kept it because it was cheaper than a second cell line, a relic from an era when phones stayed attached to walls and privacy meant something. He picked up. "Declan, it's Martin from Ms. Thorne's residence." The voice was English-cultured, belonging to the head of household staff who'd briefed Declan before the first private dinner 3 weeks ago. Relief flooded through him so fast it made him dizzy. "Martin, thank God. Is Ms. Thorne aware of—" "She's aware. Currently in meetings with her legal team and public relations advisors. She asked me to contact you directly." Martin's tone remained professional, betraying nothing but the fact that he'd called at all meant the situation was bad enough to warrant direct intervention. "Are you safe? Are there reporters at your location?" "There were 2 outside earlier. I don't know if they're still there." "Stay inside. Don't speak to anyone from the media. Ms. Thorne's lawyers will be issuing a statement this afternoon clarifying the nature of your employment relationship." Declan sat down on the edge of his bed, which was also the couch, which was also where Jasper slept when they couldn't afford anything bigger than a studio apartment in a neighborhood that real estate agents called emerging, but residents called forgotten. "In the meantime, she wanted me to give you her private number in case you need to reach her directly." Martin recited 10 digits. Declan wrote them on the back of an envelope from a medical billing company that was threatening collections, his hand shaking badly enough that the numbers looked like they'd been written during an earthquake. Tell her I'm sorry. I don't know how this happened, but I never meant for any of this to affect her. She knows that. She also wanted me to tell you she's handling it. Don't worry." "Don't worry." As if that were possible when his face was plastered across the internet and reporters were stalking his apartment building and he'd just lost every source of income except the money Cordelia had already paid him, which now felt like evidence in a trial he hadn't known he was facing. Martin hung up. Declan sat holding the envelope, staring at Cordelia's private number, and wondered what the hell had just happened to his life. 4 months earlier, the morning that started, everything had begun, the way every morning began, with an alarm screaming at 4:30, and Declan's hand shooting out from under a blanket too thin to be called adequate, slapping the button with the practiced precision of someone who'd been doing this for years. He lay still for 3 seconds, listening to Jasper's breathing from the pull-out couch 3 feet away. The rhythm of it steady and unburdened by the knowledge of rent due in 9 days, or the $47 in their bank account, or the fact that his father worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford shoes without holes. Then he sat up, planted his feet on cold floor, and started the routine that would carry them both through another day. The bathroom mirror showed a man who looked older than 32, dark circles under gray eyes. Stubble he didn't have time to shave, hair that needed cutting but wouldn't get it until next month, when maybe he'd have $20 to spare for something that wasn't groceries or utilities or debt payments that barely touched the principal. He splashed cold water on his face, brushed his teeth, walked the 6 steps back to the main room that served every function a home required, and most that it shouldn't. Jasper was still asleep, curled under a donated blanket with a superhero pattern, his small hand clutching the teddy bear that had been a gift from Emily before the cancer, before the medical bills that devoured their savings in 6 months, before Declan's entire world condensed into this 400-square-foot box, and the constant calculation of which bills could wait another week. He made coffee in a machine he'd found at a thrift store, the kind that sputtered and hissed but still worked, which was the only criterion that mattered. While it brewed, he checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Aurelius. The breakfast shift needed coverage. He texted back immediately. "On my way. Be there by 6. That meant waking Eleanor Hastings next door early again. The 72-year-old widow watched Jasper before school started refusing payment with a Yorkshire accent that brooked no argument. She'd lost her grandson Tommy 3 years ago in a car accident, and watching Jasper gave her something to do besides grieve, or so she claimed. Declan suspected she just had a bigger heart than made sense in a city that rewarded hardness. He hated asking. He asked anyway because the alternative was leaving a 5-year-old alone, and that wasn't an option his conscience could survive. Declan poured coffee into a travel mug with a broken handle, grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, and knelt beside Jasper's couch. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, brushing hair from his son's forehead. "Daddy has to go to work a little early today. Mrs. Hastings is going to come over, okay?" Jasper stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Is it morning?" "Almost. Go back to sleep. I'll see you tonight. Promise." The question hit like it always did, a reminder that promises had been broken before, that a 5-year-old shouldn't have to ask for guarantees that his father would come home. "Promise. I love you." "Love you too, Daddy." Declan texted Eleanor, locked the apartment door, and took the stairs down 4 flights because the elevator had been broken for a month and the landlord kept saying someone would fix it soon, which was the same thing he said about the radiator and the hot water and every other thing in this building that didn't work properly. The February air outside hit like a slap. Wind cut through his jacket as he hurried toward the subway station 6 blocks away, hunched against cold that found every gap in fabric too worn to provide real protection. The city was just waking up. Garbage trucks rumbled through streets still dark except for streetlights that flickered like they were tired of their jobs. Delivery vans double-parked outside bodegas. Homeless men huddled in doorways with cardboard signs asking for kindness from strangers who'd learned not to see them. Declan kept his head down and walked fast. $47 in his bank account until Friday. A Metro card with 2 rides left. Rent due in 9 days. The breakfast shift would help. Every shift helped. The subway platform was crowded with the early morning workforce. Nurses ending overnight shifts, their scrubs wrinkled and faces exhausted. Janitors heading to office buildings they'd clean before the people who actually worked there arrived. Delivery drivers clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Declan found a spot against the wall and closed his eyes, letting the rumble of approaching trains wash over him. He'd been a teacher once. 4th grade. He'd loved it the way kids' faces lit up when they finally understood a concept they'd been struggling with, the notes parents sent, thanking him for carrying the feeling that he was building something that mattered. Then Emily got sick. Stage 4. Pancreatic cancer, the kind with survival rates measured in months, not years. The medical bills piled up faster than insurance could cover them. He burned through their savings in 6 months, maxed out credit cards, took out loans he'd never be able to repay. She died 3 weeks before Jasper's 4th birthday, and Declan was left with a mountain of debt, a traumatized child, and a teaching salary that couldn't cover both. So he'd made a choice. Quit teaching, moved to a cheaper apartment, started working whatever jobs paid cash or offered flexible hours. Restaurants mostly, delivery driving when he could borrow a car, warehouse shifts on weekends when Eleanor could take Jasper for longer stretches. It wasn't a career. It was survival. The train screeched into the station. Declan squeezed into the packed car, grabbed an overhead rail, and swayed with the motion as the subway hurtled downtown toward the restaurant district where Manhattan's elite paid $30 for avocado toast and $50 for eggs. Benedict, and where Declan Pierce was about to meet a woman who would change everything. He arrived at Aurelius at 5:52 using the employee entrance in the alley behind the building. The kitchen was already chaos-lined, cooks shouting in Spanish, pans clanging, the head chef screaming about a missing shipment of truffles that probably cost more than Declan's monthly rent. He clocked in, changed into his server uniform, black slacks, white button-down black tie, and checked the reservation list. Claire Montgomery appeared beside him, clutching a tablet like it might escape if she loosened her grip. "You're taking the private dining room." Declan's stomach dropped. "I've never worked private dining." "You have now. Marcus called in sick, and you're the only one here who doesn't look hungover." She shoved the tablet at him, her Scottish accent thickening with stress. "Guest's name is Cordelia Thorne. She owns half the buildings in this city, so don't screw it up. Smile, be invisible, and for the love of everything holy, don't spill anything." Cordelia Thorne. Even Declan, who didn't follow business news or society pages, recognized the name. Thorne Industries. Real estate empire. One of those faces that appeared on Forbes covers with headlines like "The Woman Who Built Manhattan" or "Self-Made Billionaire at 40. "Got it. Invisible. Don't spill." "I mean it, Declan. This woman tips like a normal person's monthly rent if you don't piss her off." He nodded and headed toward the private dining room, a glass-walled space overlooking the street with a single table set for one. Fresh orchids in the center, silverware polished to mirror brightness, a menu listing items without prices because anyone eating here didn't need to ask. Declan checked his reflection in the hallway window, smoothed his tie, and took a breath. He'd served plenty of wealthy people before. The trick was staying pleasant and forgettable. They didn't want conversation. They wanted efficiency. At 7:28, Cordelia Thorne walked through the restaurant entrance. She wasn't what he expected. The photographs online showed someone polished and untouchable, severe business suits, hair pulled back, expression that could cut glass. The woman who entered the private dining room looked tired. Her suit was impeccable charcoal gray with razor-sharp tailoring, but there were shadows under her eyes and tension in her jaw that no amount of expensive fabric could hide. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and her phone in the other, already mid-conversation. "I don't care what the zoning board says, James. Find the loophole." She didn't look at Declan as she sat down, setting the phone on speaker while she opened the briefcase. "We have 6 weeks until groundbreaking, and I'm not pushing the timeline because some bureaucrat wants a bigger bribe." The voice on the phone stammered something about regulations. Cordelia's response was ice. "I'll handle it." "But Victoria, you need to—" "I need to—" "What?" "Take a break. Delegate. I've heard it all, James. Call me when you have a solution." She ended the call and finally looked up at Declan. Her eyes were sharp, pale blue, the kind that seemed to see through polite facades directly into whatever truth you were hiding. "Coffee? Black. And I'll have the smoked salmon with poached eggs." "Right away, Ms. Thorne." He turned toward the door just as it swung open. A young server. Emma couldn't have been more than 21 of the new hires from last week, who was still learning the layout, stumbled through carrying a tray of water pitchers. She didn't see the step down into the private dining area. It happened in slow motion. Her foot caught the edge. The tray tilted. Water arced through the air in a crystalline wave aimed directly at Cordelia Thorne's back. Declan moved without thinking. He lunged forward, grabbing Emma's arm and yanking her sideways. The tray clattered to the floor, pitchers shattered across marble tile. Water splashed across Declan's uniform and onto the edge of Cordelia's suit jacket. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Emma looked like she might cry. Cordelia Thorne stood slowly, water dripping from her sleeve, and turned around. Her expression was unreadable. "I am so sorry, Ms. Thorne," Declan said immediately, stepping between Cordelia and Emma. "That was completely my fault. I should have been watching the door." Cordelia's eyebrow arched. "Your fault you weren't carrying the tray." "I was blocking the path. I apologize for the disruption. I'll get you a towel and fresh coffee immediately." He could feel Emma shaking beside him, could hear Claire's heels clicking rapidly across the restaurant floor toward them, each step promising consequences. This was the part where he'd get fired. He'd been fired from jobs for less. But maybe if he took full responsibility, Emma would keep her position. She looked like she needed it. Cordelia studied him for a long moment, her gaze moving from his face to his soaked uniform to the terrified girl half hidden behind him. Then she pulled out her phone and took a photograph of the mess on the floor. Declan's heart sank. She was documenting it. Evidence for the complaint she'd file with management. Ms. Thorne, I'm so terribly sorry. Claire arrived breathless, already pulling out her own phone to call maintenance. Cordelia cut her off calmly. It was an accident. These things happen. I'd still like my coffee and salmon, please, and someone should clean up this glass before anyone else gets hurt. Claire grabbed Emma's arm, dragging her toward the kitchen while hissing threats that would probably result in the girl quitting by lunch. Declan stood frozen for a second, not quite believing what had just happened. No screaming, no demands to speak with the owner. No firing. Cordelia Thorne had sat back down and was typing on her phone as if nothing had occurred. Your coffee. He managed to make his voice work. Yes, still black. Declan hurried to the kitchen, changed into a spare shirt one of the line cooks lent him, and returned with fresh coffee and her breakfast. Cordelia ate in silence, reading something on her tablet, occasionally making notes with a stylus. He refilled her water, once brought extra lemon when she requested it, and otherwise stayed invisible. When she finished, she closed the tablet and looked directly at him. You lied. Declan's throat tightened. Ma'am, you weren't blocking any path. That girl tripped on her own, but you claimed responsibility anyway. Cordelia's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted, curiosity maybe, or the kind of interest people show when they encounter something unexpected. Why? He could have deflected, could have insisted it was true, maintained the lie. But something about the way she asked, direct, genuinely wanting to know, made him answer honestly. She's new. Probably needs this job. I figured I had a better chance surviving the complaint than she did. So you threw yourself in front of the metaphorical bus. Something like that. Cordelia picked up her coffee cup, took a slow sip, and set it down with deliberate precision. That's either incredibly noble or incredibly stupid. Probably both. For the first time since she'd walked into the restaurant, Cordelia Thorne smiled. It was small, barely a curve at the corner of her mouth, but it was real. I'll be back next Thursday, same time. I'd like you as my server again. Of course, Ms. Thorne. She pulled out her wallet, sleek black leather that probably cost more than Declan's rent, and left $500 bills on the table. Declan stared at the cash, certain he'd miscounted. Ms. Thorne, I think you made a mistake. She was already walking toward the door. I didn't. See you next week, Declan Pierce. She left. Declan stood alone in the private dining room looking at $500 in cash and wondered what the hell had just happened. Over the next 6 weeks, Cordelia Thorne became a fixture in Declan's Thursday mornings with the regularity of a heartbeat. 7:30 sharp every week, always alone, always working through breakfast on her tablet or conducting hushed phone conversations about zoning variances and board meetings and deals worth more money than Declan would see in 10 lifetimes. She never made small talk. Ordered the same thing. Black coffee refilled twice, smoked salmon with poached eggs, occasionally the seasonal frittata when she felt adventurous. Tipped exactly $500 every visit regardless of what she ate or how long she stayed. The other servers noticed. Of course they noticed. Claire stopped assigning Declan the worst shifts, the ones that started before sunrise or ended after midnight. The kitchen staff treated him differently once word spread that he'd somehow become the chosen server of one of New York's wealthiest women. Speculation ran rampant in the break room. Was he sleeping with her? Was she grooming him for something? Was this some elaborate social experiment conducted by people with too much money and not enough sense? Declan ignored it. Showed up on time, worked hard, went home to Jasper. Whatever interest Cordelia had in him would fade eventually. Wealthy people moved on. This was temporary, like everything else good in his life had proven to be. Then came week 6, when Cordelia arrived 10 minutes late. This was unusual. She ran her life with the precision of someone who understood that time was the only resource you couldn't buy more of, no matter how many billions you accumulated. But on this particular morning, she walked into the private dining room looking worse than Declan had ever seen her. Hair slightly disheveled, pulled back in what appeared to be a hasty ponytail rather than the sleek chignon she usually wore. No makeup. The tightness around her eyes suggested either a headache or something worse. She collapsed into the chair without her usual controlled grace. "Coffee." Declan poured it immediately, noting the way her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around the cup. "Long morning, Miss Thorne." She rubbed her temples with her free hand. "Long year." It was the first personal thing she'd ever said to him, the first crack in the professional facade she maintained with everyone, the armor that came with being a woman running an empire in a city that ate the weak for breakfast. "Do you ever feel like you're running as fast as you can but still falling behind?" Declan paused, coffee pot still in hand, genuinely unsure if she wanted an answer or was just thinking out loud. He decided on honesty. "Every day." Cordelia looked up at him then, really looked as if seeing him for the first time instead of just another server in an endless parade of interchangeable staff. "You have a child, don't you?" The fact that she knew surprised him. "A son, Jasper. He's 5. And you work here plus other jobs." "3 others, when I can get the shifts." Her expression did something complicated, softening in a way that made her look younger despite the exhaustion etched around her eyes. The Father of the Year award must be exhausting. Declan couldn't tell if she was mocking him or commiserating. He chose to assume the latter. "It's what you do when someone depends on you." Cordelia's gaze held his for a beat longer than comfortable. Then she returned her attention to her tablet. "Yes, it is." She ordered breakfast, ate in silence, left $500 and departed without another word, but something fundamental had shifted in the space between them like tectonic plates adjusting to new pressure. The following Thursday, week 7 by Declan's count, though he'd stopped questioning why he was counting, Cordelia arrived with a proposition that would alter the trajectory of both their lives. "I'm hosting a private dinner tomorrow night. 10 guests, business associates. My regular catering company is short-handed and I need additional serving staff. Are you available tomorrow evening, 7 to 11? Declan ran through his mental calendar. He was supposed to work a delivery shift, but if this paid anything close to what she tipped for breakfast— "What time?" 7 p.m. It'll run until around 11. She slid a business card across the table, her fingers brushing the edge before withdrawing. "I'll pay you $1,000 for the evening." Declan nearly dropped the coffee pot. His hand caught it at the last second, ceramic handle slick with sudden sweat. "1,000, Ms. Thorne? Non-negotiable. You'll be working. I expect professional service. If you're interested, here's the address." The card showed an address in Tribeca, the kind of neighborhood where apartments started at $10 million and climbed from there. Employee entrance west side of the building. Ask for Martin, her head of household staff. He'll brief you. "I'll be there." "Good." She returned to her tablet as if the conversation had never happened, but Declan caught the ghost of satisfaction crossing her features before she buried it in spreadsheets and acquisition reports. That night he told Eleanor he had a special job and asked if she could watch Jasper until midnight. She agreed immediately with that brisk Yorkshire efficiency that brooked no argument, refusing the extra money he tried to press into her hand. "Put that toward the lad's future. I've got my pension and more time than sense. Now off with you." The penthouse dinner went exactly as Martin had briefed, professional, precise, utterly unlike anything Declan had experienced in his months at Aurelius. When Martin handed him an envelope at midnight containing $1,500 bills instead of the agreed 1,000, Declan tried to refuse. "Ms. Thorne's instructions," Martin said with finality that ended the discussion. Declan walked out into the February night holding more cash than he'd seen in months, unaware that across the street a photographer with a telephoto lens was capturing images of him leaving the building. Unaware that those images were being transmitted to a laptop in a car parked down the block where Langston Whitmore was reviewing each photograph with the cold satisfaction of someone who'd just found the ammunition he needed. Week 10, mid-March. The pattern had solidified into something that felt almost sustainable. Thursday breakfasts. 3 more private dinners over the following month, each paying the same mysterious $1,500 instead of the stated $1,000. Cordelia never explained the extra $500. Martin delivered it without comment. Declan stopped questioning and started planning. The $1,500 from the first dinner had let him upgrade to a one-bedroom apartment in the same building, not luxury, but Jasper finally had a door he could close, a window that looked out over an air shaft instead of directly into someone else's kitchen. The boy had cried when he saw it, overwhelmed by the concept of privacy after 2 years in a studio where every sound traveled. Declan paid his rent on time for the first time in a year. Bought Jasper clothes that fit instead of thrift store hand-me-downs. Even opened a savings account with $200 that felt like the beginning of something that might eventually resemble security. But the attention at Aurelius was increasing. Whispers in the break room about how Declan had lucked into the golden goose. Claire's pointed comments about knowing the right people. Other servers treating him with a mixture of resentment and curiosity, like he'd won a lottery they hadn't known they could enter. Declan tried to ignore it, showed up on time, worked hard, went home to his son. Week 13, late March. Cordelia walked into the private dining room at 7:30 looking worse than Declan had ever seen her. Not just tired, wrecked. Her suit was wrinkled, actually wrinkled, which seemed impossible for someone whose appearance was usually flawless. Hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. No makeup. She dropped into the chair with none of her usual control. "Coffee. Cancel my breakfast order. I'm not hungry." Declan poured, noting the tremor in her hands as she wrapped them around the cup. "Are you all right, Ms. Thorne?" She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "No." Then after a pause that stretched like wire about to snap, "Do you follow business news, Declan?" "Not really." "Lucky you." She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. The screen showed an article from the Financial Times. Thorne Industries faces hostile takeover attempt. Former partner seeks control of empire. Declan scanned it quickly. Something about a corporate power struggle, a former business partner trying to acquire enough shares to force Cordelia out of her own company. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She took a long drink of coffee, her knuckles white against the ceramic. "Langston has been trying to destroy me since we broke up. He's just getting more creative about it. 3 years together, and the moment I ended it, he dedicated his life to taking everything I built." "He sounds like a real prize." That earned him a ghost of a smile. "That's one way to put it." She looked at him then with an expression he couldn't quite parse. Curiosity mixed with something that might have been loneliness or recognition, or the simple exhaustion of maintaining walls that never came down. "You don't read about me, do you? You don't know anything about my life outside these Thursday mornings." "I try not to make assumptions." "That's refreshing." She leaned back, studying him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Everyone else I know wants something. They smile and nod and wait for the right moment to ask for favors or connections or money. But you actually tried to refuse extra payment because it was too much." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed, the sound carrying the weight of obligations she couldn't escape. "I have to go. Emergency board meeting." She stood, leaving $500 on the table out of what appeared to be pure habit. Then she paused, one hand on her briefcase, and asked the question that would haunt Declan for months. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Are you happy?" The question caught him completely off guard, stripped away the server-customer dynamic, and left him standing there as just Declan Pierce, 32 years old, and drowning slowly in a life he hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. I don't know. I have Jasper. That's enough." "But is it what you wanted, this life?" He thought about teaching, about the career he'd loved and lost, about Emily and the future they'd planned before cancer stole it, about years of grinding poverty and constant fear that one unexpected expense would tip them from struggling into homeless. "No, but it's what I have." Cordelia nodded slowly as if he'd confirmed something she'd suspected. "I'll see you next week." She left. Declan cleared the table and went back to work, unaware that across the street the same photographer from before was capturing images through the restaurant's windows. Images of Cordelia Thorne smiling at a server looking more relaxed than she had in months. Images that would be uploaded to a cloud server by evening, sold to tabloids by morning, and detonated across the internet by the end of the week. Week 14, first Tuesday of April. The headline detonated across Declan's phone screen at 6:47 in the morning. He stood motionless in his kitchen, a spatula dripping scrambled eggs onto linoleum, staring at words that refused to make sense. Billionaire CEO, Cordelia Thorne's secret affair with struggling waiter. Love or exploitation. The photograph showed him leaving Cordelia's building at midnight. His phone began vibrating before he could process the implications. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, Instagram erupting with strangers whose opinions felt like fists. "Daddy, your phone is loud." Jasper looked up from his cereal with eyes too observant for a child who should have been protected from mornings like this. Declan silenced it without looking away from the screen. The article spun a narrative he didn't recognize. Secret romance, midnight rendezvous, substantial financial compensation for reasons unclear. More photographs emerged. Him pouring coffee at Aurelius. Cordelia smiling at him across the table. Another shot through the restaurant window suggesting intimacy that hadn't existed. Claire called. He answered. "Don't come in. You're suspended pending investigation." Her Scottish accent cut sharp with stress. "There are reporters outside the restaurant. The owner is losing his mind." "Claire, I was working. It doesn't look like that's it. Don't contact anyone until you hear from HR." The line went dead. His phone rang again. Unknown number. A woman's voice, professional and sharp. "Rebecca Winters from the Metro Daily. I'm doing a story on your relationship with Cordelia Thorne." Declan hung up. The phone rang immediately. Different number. He declined. Another call, then another. 20 minutes later, they stepped out of the building into a gauntlet he hadn't anticipated. Two men with cameras raised their equipment the moment he appeared. "Mr. Pierce, can you comment on your relationship with Cordelia Thorne? How long have you been seeing her? Is it true she's paying you?" Declan grabbed Jasper's hand and walked faster. The photographers followed their footsteps loud on pavement. "Daddy, why are they taking pictures of us?" They reached the bus stop. Declan knelt, blocking the photographers with his body. "Listen to me, Jasper. Some people are going to be asking weird questions for a little while. If anyone approaches you at school, you don't talk to them. You go find your teacher immediately. Understand?" Jasper's eyes searched his father's face for reassurance Declan couldn't provide. "Why are they taking pictures of us?" "Because they're confused about something. But it's nothing bad. Okay? Everything's fine." The lie tasted like ash. The bus arrived. Declan hugged his son tight and watched him climb aboard with backward glances that broke something in his chest. Inside his apartment, the landline rang. Martin's voice brought relief flooding through. "Ms. Thorne is aware, currently in meetings with her legal team. She wanted me to give you her private number in case you need to reach her directly." Declan wrote the number on an envelope, his hand unsteady. "Tell her I'm sorry. I don't know how this happened." "She knows that. She's handling it." Over the next 72 hours, the feeding frenzy accelerated. Someone leaked his financial records, debt eviction notices, Emily's medical bills displayed like evidence of moral failure. His teaching certification surfaced, twisted into speculation about why he'd quit. Photos of Jasper appeared online with captions questioning his fitness as a father. By Wednesday evening, the story had metastasized beyond tabloids into legitimate news talk shows, making jokes, op-eds, debating class and power, a hashtag trending nationwide. Declan stopped reading, stopped checking his phone, stayed inside and waited for the storm to pass. It didn't pass. It grew teeth. The delivery company suspended him. The warehouse sent a text, "Don't come in until media attention dies down." Within 24 hours, he'd lost every source of income except the money Cordelia had already paid him. He sat with her private number for 15 minutes before finding the courage to dial. She answered on the third ring. "Declan." Her voice was tense but controlled. "Are you all right? I don't understand what's happening. This is Langston. He hired a private investigator months ago. The photographer, the leaked photos, the sources feeding tabloids, it's all him. He's trying to force my board to question my judgment. Anger surged through him, hot and sharp. So, I'm just collateral damage? Yes. Her honesty was almost startling. And I shouldn't have let this happen. I should have been more careful about being seen with someone who doesn't fit the narrative people expect. About letting myself have one small part of my life that felt normal. Something in his chest tightened. I liked our Thursday mornings, Declan. You didn't treat me like a walking checkbook. You were just real. That's rare. I was doing my job. No. You were being kind. There's a difference. Neither spoke for a moment. He could hear voices in the background on her end. My lawyers are preparing a statement. That should calm things down. Will it? Honestly, I don't know. Her sigh carried exhaustion that went bone deep. I'm having my security team watch your building. If things get worse, call me directly. Day or night. The statement from Cordelia's lawyers dropped at 2 p.m. Clear, direct, and completely insufficient. Within an hour, the internet had torn it apart. People questioned why a billionaire needed to hire one specific server repeatedly. Others pointed out that the photos showed them looking too comfortable. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Thursday morning arrived, 7:30, their usual time. Declan couldn't go suspended and the restaurant was mobbed with photographers. His phone rang at exactly 7:30. I know this was supposed to be our morning. Cordelia's voice carried weariness that matched his own. It's not your fault. Declan, I need to ask you something. Langston is going to approach you. Maybe not today, but soon. He's going to offer you money to say I coerced you, that there was something inappropriate. When he does, I need you to say no. His grip tightened on the phone. You think I'd betray you? I think you have a son who depends on you and Bill's crushing you. I think Langston will offer enough to change your life. I wouldn't blame you for considering it. The honesty hit like cold water. I'm not going to lie about you, even if it means security for Jasper. Even then, the question hung heavy between them. Even then, I don't lie, especially not about people who've been decent to me. He heard her exhale relief, maybe. Thank you. Her voice went quiet, thick with emotion he'd never heard from her before. Friday, week 15. Declan was taking out trash when a black town car pulled up. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. Langston Whitmore. Declan Pierce. The voice was smooth, practiced. I have nothing to say to you. Langston fell into step beside him. You've lost your jobs. Your name is mud. You're drowning in debt. And you have a son who's going to suffer. I can fix all of that. They reached the entrance. Declan stopped. How? Langston's smile didn't reach his eyes. Tell the truth about Cordelia. How she used her wealth to take advantage of you. How she made you uncomfortable but you needed the money. How she manipulated a struggling single father. Disgust rolled through Declan's stomach. That's not what happened. Does it matter? The public is halfway to believing it. One interview confirming their suspicions, and I'll make sure you never worry about money again. $1 million, Declan. Cash. Enough to pay off debt, get a bigger apartment, set up a college fund. All you have to do is tell people what they already want to hear. The number echoed in his head. He thought about Jasper's shoes with holes, about medical bills accruing interest faster than he could pay principal, about the teaching career he'd loved and lost, about what security would feel like. Then he thought about Cordelia asking if he was happy, about her trusting him with her private number, about the way she'd defended him when the water spilled. No. Langston's smile didn't waver. Talk to your son. Ask yourself if your pride is worth his future. I said no. Don't contact me again. Declan walked into his building without looking back. That night he called Cordelia and told her what had happened. He offered you $1 million. She sounded stunned. Yeah. And I turned him down. Silence stretched. And you turned him down. Her voice had gone soft, almost wondering. Of course. I'm not going to help him destroy you just because my life is hard. That's not who I am. More silence. When she spoke again, emotion made her voice thick. I don't know how to thank you for that. You don't have to. It's just basic decency. No, Declan. It's rarer than you think. Week 16, mid-April. The custody complaint arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Declan was at Jasper's school when his phone rang. Martin's voice was tight with controlled fury. Langston Whitmore's legal team has filed for emergency custody evaluation concerning Jasper. They're claiming Ms. Thorne's presence constitutes an unstable environment, that your judgment has been compromised. They've petitioned family court to investigate whether Jasper should be placed in protective services. The playground noise faded to static. His vision narrowed to a pinpoint. They can't. Jasper is fine. I know. Ms. Thorne's lawyers are preparing a response. But she wanted you aware in case Child Services contacts you. After Martin hung up, Declan stood watching his son play tag, their laughter carrying on wind that felt too cold, and felt something inside him crack. The social worker arrived that evening. Ms. Judith Callahan, 45, Irish-American professional and apologetic. Declan showed her around the apartment. The clean space where Jasper had his own room, now small, but with a door and a window and shelves for the books Cordelia had been giving him. The refrigerator stocked with healthy food, school records showing perfect attendance and good grades. And how often does Ms. Thorne interact with your son? A few times a week. We have dinner. She's teaching him about books and architecture. She's kind to him. Ms. Callahan wrote notes. Has she ever been inappropriate with Jasper in any way? Declan's jaw clenched. Never. She treats him with respect. Jasper adores her. More notes. Then Ms. Callahan looked up. Mr. Pierce, this seems like a very stable environment. Jasper appears healthy and well-adjusted, but I do need to conduct formal interviews with him and Ms. Thorne before I can close this investigation. After she left, Declan sat on his couch and put his head in his hands. Jasper was at Eleanor's, unaware that strangers were questioning whether his father was capable of caring for him. Sleep became impossible. He lost 6 pounds in a week checking Jasper's breathing every hour, like the boy might disappear if he looked away too long. Late one evening, Cordelia arrived without warning, letting herself in with the key he'd given her 2 weeks earlier. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him and pulled him against her shoulder. I've never been this scared. His voice came out rough. I know, but Jasper is your son, and you're an excellent father. No court is going to take him based on Langston's lies. You don't know that. The system is designed to be cautious. Cautious means they might decide a single father dating a controversial billionaire is too much risk. Cordelia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, certainty filled her voice. Then I'll step back. Declan lifted his head. What? If our relationship is putting Jasper at risk, I'll step back. We pause this until the investigation is over. Cordelia. She turned to face him, taking both his hands. Listen to me. I care about you. She paused, gathering courage. I'm falling in love with you if I'm being honest. But Jasper comes first. He has to. If the price of being together right now is risking his stability, it's too high. He couldn't speak for a moment, emotion closing his throat. I don't want to lose you either. You won't. This is temporary. We'll get through the investigation, prove Langston is wrong, then we can be together. But right now we protect Jasper. That's what matters. Declan knew she was right. Hated it, but knew it. Okay, we pause. But the minute this is over, I'm not letting you go. That's a promise. She kissed him once, soft and sad. Then she left. After she'd gone, Cordelia sat in her car for 20 minutes before starting the engine. Martin found her there when he came to check her forehead pressed against the steering wheel, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd held back in front of Declan. She'd built an empire by never showing weakness. Tonight she'd walked away from the first person in a decade who made her feel like weakness might be worth the risk. Ms. Thorne, she straightened, wiped her eyes, became the CEO again. I'm fine, Martin. Let's go home. Weeks 17 and 18. The investigation proceeded with bureaucratic efficiency. Ms. Callahan interviewed Jasper, who cheerfully reported that Daddy was the best and Ms. Thorne knew everything about dragons. She interviewed Eleanor, whose Yorkshire accent thickened with fury as she defended Declan. She interviewed teachers who had nothing but positive observations. Cordelia submitted to her interview, answering questions with calm professionalism, providing financial records and character references, transparent and cooperative. On a Sunday afternoon, when Declan was helping Jasper build a Lego city, his phone rang. Ms. Callahan's voice brought relief so intense he had to sit down. "Mr. Pierce, I'll be recommending the complaint be dismissed. My investigation found no evidence of neglect or instability. Jasper is clearly thriving and your relationship with Ms. Thorne appears healthy. I'll be submitting my report tomorrow." "Thank you." The words barely made it past the emotion in his throat. He immediately called Cordelia. "It's over. They're dismissing it. They found nothing wrong." He heard her exhale tears or laughter or both. "Is Jasper okay?" "He's fine. He barely noticed." "And you?" "I will be, especially now that I can see you again." Her voice carried warmth that made his chest tight. "Dinner tonight, my place. I've missed you. We've talked every day." "I know. But I've missed you. There's a difference." The investigation proceeded with bureaucratic efficiency over the next 2 weeks, each day stretching like wire pulled too tight. Ms. Callahan interviewed Jasper first, taking him to a room at the Family Services office decorated with toys that were supposed to make children feel comfortable, but only succeeded in making the clinical nature of the evaluation more obvious. Declan waited in the hallway, listening to his son's voice through the door, cheerful, unburdened, answering questions about whether Daddy made him breakfast and whether Ms. Thorne was nice to him and whether he felt safe at home. The innocence in those answers felt like knives. When Jasper emerged 40 minutes later, he was clutching a lollipop and seemed confused about why his father looked so pale. "Did I do good, Daddy?" "You did great, buddy." Eleanor Hastings was interviewed next. The Yorkshire woman arrived at the Family Services office with the kind of righteous fury that came from watching someone she cared about get persecuted for no reason beyond spite. She spent 30 minutes defending Declan as a devoted father who'd sacrificed everything for his son, her accent thickening with emotion until Ms. Callahan had to ask her to repeat several statements for the record. "That lad would walk through fire for his boy. Anyone saying otherwise is daft and cruel, and I'll thank you to tell whoever filed this nonsense complaint that they ought to be ashamed of themselves." The teachers at Jasper's school provided written statements and sat for brief interviews. Every one of them had nothing but positive observations about the boy's adjustment, his emotional stability, his clear attachment to his father. One mentioned that Jasper had recently started drawing pictures of my family, 3 figures labeled Daddy, me, and Cordelia, all holding hands under a sun that took up half the page. Ms. Callahan included the drawing in her report without comment, but Declan saw her expression soften when she looked at it. Cordelia's interview was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Declan wasn't allowed to be present, but she called him afterward from her car. "How did it go?" "Fine. I answered her questions. Provided financial records showing I've never given you money beyond fair payment for work performed. Character references from people who've known me for decades. I was transparent and cooperative." She sounded tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from having every aspect of your life examined by strangers with clipboards. "Thank you for doing this, for not just walking away from the mess." "Declan, I'm not walking away. I told you this is temporary. We're going to get through it." Her voice carried conviction he desperately wanted to believe. 2 days later, on a Sunday afternoon, when Declan was helping Jasper build an elaborate Lego city on the living room floor, his phone rang. Ms. Callahan's name appeared on the screen. He answered, heart-hammering. "Mr. Pierce, I wanted to inform you that I'll be recommending the complaint be dismissed. My investigation found no evidence of neglect, instability, or inappropriate behavior. Jasper is clearly thriving in your care, and your relationship with Ms. Thorne appears healthy and appropriate. I'll be submitting my report to the court tomorrow." Relief flooded through him so intensely he had to sit down. The Lego tower Jasper had been building toppled over blocks, scattering across the floor. "Thank you. Thank you so much." I'm sorry you had to go through this process. It's clear the complaint was filed with ulterior motives. I hope whoever did this faces consequences." After she hung up, Declan immediately called Cordelia. "It's over. The investigation is being dismissed. They found nothing wrong." He heard her exhale a sound that might have been tears or laughter or both. "Thank God. Is Jasper okay?" "He's fine. He barely noticed anything was happening." "And you? Are you okay?" "I will be. Especially now that I can see you again without worrying it'll be used against me." There was a pause, and when she spoke again her voice carried warmth that made his chest tight. "Dinner tonight, my place. I've missed you." "We've talked every day." "I know, but I've missed you. There's a difference." That evening, after dropping Jasper at Eleanor's with promises to be back before bedtime, Declan stood outside Cordelia's penthouse for the first time in 3 weeks and felt like he was stepping back into a version of his life that had been suspended mid-breath. She opened the door and pulled him inside before he could speak, kissing him with an urgency that communicated everything words couldn't. They stood in her foyer holding each other, not talking, just existing in the same space after weeks of forced separation that had felt like months. "I meant what I said," she murmured against his shoulder. "I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I'm already there." Declan pulled back to look at her. This woman who'd given up so much already and seemed prepared to give up more if it meant protecting him and Jasper. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it." "Are you still scared?" "Terrified, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions." He touched her face, tracing the line of her jaw with fingers that had stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. "Langston tried to take everything from both of us. And he failed. We're still here. We're still together. That has to mean something. It means we're stronger than he thought." They ordered takeout because neither wanted to waste time cooking, ate on her couch, and talked about the future, about Declan's students and Cordelia's new company, about Jasper's upcoming birthday, and whether they should take a trip somewhere next summer. Normal conversations that felt radical after weeks of crisis management. Later, after Cordelia had fallen asleep against his shoulder and the city lights glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows like stars brought down to earth, Declan let himself believe that maybe they'd survived the worst. That maybe happy endings weren't reserved for other people but were possible for anyone brave enough to fight for them. His phone buzzed with a text from Martin. "Ms. Thorne's lawyers have received confirmation that Langston Whitmore's custody complaint has been formally dismissed with prejudice. He cannot refile. You and Jasper are safe." Declan closed his eyes and finally truly let himself breathe. The lawsuit against Langston was filed on a Monday morning in early May spring, finally asserting itself over winter's stubborn grip on the city. Cordelia's legal team had spent weeks building their case, assembling evidence with the meticulous care of people who understood that one mistake could unravel everything. The filing made headlines within hours. Not the tabloid speculation that had dominated coverage before, but actual news, corporate lawyer speak, translated into articles about harassment and defamation, about a calculated campaign to destroy two people's reputations for revenge. The evidence was damning. Emails between Langston and the private investigator laying out exactly what he wanted, documented, and when. Payment records showing over $300,000 spent on surveillance photographer fees and feeding stories to journalists who were either complicit or too lazy to verify their sources. Text messages coordinating the release of information for maximum impact, timed to coincide with board meetings and investor calls. It was all there. A paper trail that proved malicious intent beyond any reasonable doubt. Langston's response came 3 days later, delivered through a press conference that every major news outlet covered live. Declan was at a job interview, his first real prospect in weeks, a charter school in Queens that was willing to overlook his recent notoriety because their principal believed in second chances when his phone started vibrating with the intensity of a small earthquake. The interview ended badly. He could see it in the principal's eyes, the way she'd gone from engaged to cautious the moment she glanced at her own phone. By the time Declan left the building, Langston's press conference was the top trending topic across 3 different platforms. He watched it in his car, dread building with every passing second. Langston stood behind a podium flanked by lawyers who'd probably cost more per hour than Declan made in a month. He looked wounded, sincere, like a man who'd been falsely accused and was bravely setting the record straight. "I want to address the recent allegations made against me by Cordelia Thorne and her legal team. The truth is, I've been trying to protect someone who couldn't protect himself." The performance was masterful. He painted himself as a concerned citizen who'd noticed troubling behavior and felt obligated to investigate. Positioned Declan as a good man, caught in an impossible situation. A widower, raising a young son alone, drowning in medical debt, struggling to keep a roof over their heads. When someone like Cordelia Thorne, a woman with unlimited resources and power, takes an interest in someone that vulnerable, it creates a dangerous imbalance. I'm not saying Ms. Thorne set out to exploit Mr. Pierce. I'm saying the power differential made genuine consent impossible. He managed to make concern sound noble while simultaneously implying that Cordelia was a predator and Declan was too damaged to recognize his own exploitation. I stand by my actions. If attempting to protect someone makes me guilty of harassment, then I'll wear that label proudly. All I ever wanted was to ensure Declan Pierce and his son were safe from a situation that had already cost them so much. The press conference ended. Within minutes, the internet was ablaze with renewed speculation, opinions splitting along predictable lines, those who believed Langston was a hero standing up to an abusive billionaire, and those who saw through the manipulation to the revenge scheme underneath. But the damage was done. The narrative had shifted again, and this time Declan was being framed as too broken to know what was good for him. His phone rang. "Cordelia. Don't watch it. Too late." Her voice was tight with controlled fury. "He's lying. You know he's lying." "I know, but half the country doesn't." Declan leaned his head against the steering wheel, feeling the weight of public opinion pressing down like atmosphere at the bottom of an ocean. "Cordelia, he made me sound like a helpless victim who can't think for himself, like I'm some broken thing you're taking advantage of. Because that's the only angle he has left. If he can't prove corruption, he'll try to prove I'm morally unfit to lead. It's all about controlling the board's perception." She took a breath, steadying herself. "My lawyers are preparing a response. We'll release the full documentation tomorrow. Every contract, every payment record, every communication that proves this was a straightforward employment relationship." "And what about what it's become?" The question escaped before Declan could stop it. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither had been willing to examine too closely. "What do you mean?" "I mean the employment relationship ended the day Aurelius fired me. But we still talk every night. You got me this apartment. You called to check if Jasper was okay. That's not employer and employee anymore, Cordelia. That's something else. And Langston knows it even if we haven't said it out loud." More silence. Then Cordelia's voice came back softer but no less certain. "You're right. It is something else. And I don't know what to call it or how to define it. But I know I'm not going to let Langston Whitmore tell me I'm not allowed to care about someone just because they don't fit the profile of people I'm supposed to associate with. Even if caring about me destroys your company. Even then, though I'm hoping it won't come to that." The counterattack launched the next morning. Cordelia's lawyers released comprehensive documentation contracts showing standard rates for private event catering payment records proving every dollar Declan received was justified by work performed, testimony from Martin and other staff confirming his professionalism and the purely business nature of their initial relationship. It was thorough, detailed, and completely insufficient to combat the emotional narrative Langston had constructed, because facts didn't matter when feelings were involved, when people had already decided what they wanted to believe, and no amount of evidence would change minds that were made up. The Thorne Industries board called an emergency meeting for the following Monday. Cordelia was required to attend and defend herself against allegations of conduct unbecoming of a CEO. The meeting would determine whether she retained control of the company she'd built from nothing, or whether Langston's campaign would succeed in taking everything from her. She called Declan on Sunday night, the evening before the meeting. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly terrified." Her voice carried a vulnerability he'd never heard before the armor finally showing cracks. "I've faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, recessions that destroyed stronger companies than mine. But this is different. This isn't about business strategy or market conditions. This is about whether 12 people believe I'm morally fit to lead based on a personal relationship that shouldn't be any of their business. Do you think they'll vote against you?" I think Langston has spent months cultivating relationships with board members who were already skeptical of my leadership style. He's very good at making people doubt themselves, and I think tomorrow I'll find out whether a decade of success is enough to outweigh 3 weeks of scandal. Declan wished he could be there, tell the board that Cordelia Thorne was the most principled person he'd ever met. But his presence would only make things worse. He was the evidence of her supposed moral failure, the weakness Langston was exploiting. The best thing he could do was stay away. "You're going to be okay. You're brilliant and strong. You've weathered worse." Her laugh was hollow. "Have I? I'm not sure I have." "You survived Langston the first time, built an empire from nothing, handled every crisis with grace. Tomorrow's just another challenge. Thank you for everything. For being honest when lying would have been profitable. For not hating me even though knowing me has cost you everything. For being exactly who you are instead of who people expect you to be. Same to you." After they hung up, Declan sat in the darkness of his apartment and hoped that whatever happened in that boardroom, Cordelia would come through it intact. The trial began 2 weeks later after Cordelia had walked into the board meeting and emerged 3 hours later looking like she'd aged a decade. She wouldn't tell Declan what had happened inside, only that she'd kept her position by a margin so slim it didn't feel like victory. 3 votes. That's all that stood between me and losing everything I built. They were sitting on her balcony, the city spread out below them like a kingdom under siege. "But you kept it. For now. Langston's not done. He'll keep trying until one of us breaks." She turned to look at Declan, and he saw something in her eyes that looked like determination forged in fire. "That's why we're going to destroy him in court, completely and publicly, so he can never do this again." The trial was set for October, a crisp autumn morning that made New York feel almost manageable. Declan took personal time from the teaching job he'd finally landed. The charter school in Queens had called back after the principal did her own research and decided the tabloids were full of lies, and sat in the gallery behind Cordelia's legal team. Langston sat across the aisle with his lawyers, looking confident in a way that made Declan's stomach tight with anger. The prosecution presented their evidence methodically, building a case that was damning in its comprehensiveness. Every email, every payment record, every text message proving that Langston had orchestrated the entire scandal with the precision of someone who'd spent months planning how to inflict maximum damage. On the 3rd day, the photographer took the stand. Under oath, he admitted that Langston had specifically requested surveillance of Cordelia's penthouse, had paid bonuses for photos that looked intimate or compromising, had coached him on timing the leaks for maximum impact. He told me he wanted to destroy her credibility. Said if he couldn't have Thorne Industries, he'd make sure she couldn't either. This was never about protecting anyone. It was about revenge. Declan watched Langston's face tighten with barely controlled rage, the mask slipping enough to show what lay underneath. On the 4th day, Cordelia testified. She walked to the witness stand with the same controlled grace she brought to everything, her posture perfect, despite the exhaustion Declan knew she was carrying. She was sworn in and answered her attorney's questions with calm professionalism, walking the jury through the timeline of how she'd met Declan, why she'd hired him for private dinners, the nature of their relationship before and after the scandal broke. She was honest about everything, including her feelings. "I cared about him. Not because he needed saving or because I had some hero complex, but because he was kind and honest and treated me like a person instead of a bank account. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but in my world it was." Langston's attorney tried to trip her up during cross-examination, suggesting she'd been inappropriate with an employee, that she'd used her wealth to manipulate Declan, that her judgment had been compromised by loneliness. Cordelia didn't flinch. Mr. Pierce was hired for legitimate work and compensated fairly. When our professional relationship evolved into something personal, I made sure there was no ongoing employment dynamic that could create pressure or obligation. I've made many mistakes in my life, but pursuing a relationship with Declan Pierce isn't one of them. Even though that relationship cost you your company, I didn't lose my company. I chose to prioritize my integrity over the approval of a board that cared more about appearance than ethics. That was my choice, and I stand by it. Declan felt something swell in his chest. Pride mixed with love for this woman who'd refused to compromise herself, even when it meant risking everything she'd built. On the 6th day, Declan took the stand. Langston's attorney tried to paint him as desperate and opportunistic, someone who'd seen Cordelia's wealth as an escape from his problems. But Declan had prepared for this, had spent hours with Cordelia's legal team going over every possible angle of attack. He had receipts, text messages showing he'd tried to refuse excessive payment, emails documenting his concerns about the appearance of their relationship. Testimony from Martin confirming Declan had never asked Cordelia for anything beyond what he'd earned. "Mr. Pierce, isn't it true you accepted an apartment from Miss Thorne worth approximately $2 million? I accepted temporary housing during a crisis that Mr. Whitmore created. I was being evicted because of media attention directly caused by his surveillance and harassment. Miss Thorne offered a safe place for my son until the situation stabilized. I would have done the same for anyone I cared about if I had the resources. But you don't have resources. You're a school teacher with significant debt. Doesn't that create an inherent power imbalance in your relationship with Ms. Thorne?" Declan looked directly at the jury. "I was a server when we met. She was a billionaire. By that logic, I shouldn't be allowed to have a relationship with anyone who makes more money than I do. That's not protecting vulnerable people. That's deciding poor people don't deserve love unless it comes from someone equally broke. I won't accept that premise." Several jury members nodded, their expressions shifting from skeptical to sympathetic. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts: harassment, defamation, conspiracy to interfere with business relationships, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The judge awarded Cordelia $3 million in compensatory damages and another $5 million in punitive damages, along with a permanent restraining order preventing Langston from contacting either Cordelia or Declan ever again. The judge's statement before dismissing the court was damning. "Mr. Whitmore, you came into this courtroom claiming you were protecting the vulnerable from exploitation. The evidence has shown conclusively that you were the one doing the exploiting. You used the media as a weapon, manipulated public opinion, and attempted to destroy 2 people's lives because your ego couldn't accept rejection. This court finds your actions reprehensible and hopes this verdict serves as a warning to others who might consider similar behavior." Declan watched Langston's face crumble, watched the reality of his defeat sink in. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, he just felt tired. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them with questions and camera flashes. Cordelia's lawyer gave a brief statement about justice being served. Cordelia herself took Declan's hand and walked to the waiting car without saying a word, but the gesture communicated more than any press conference could. Inside the car, she finally exhaled, leaning against Declan's shoulder. "It's over. It's actually over. How do you feel?" "Relieved, exhausted. Angry that we had to go through any of this in the first place." She turned to look at him, and he saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "How about you?" "The same, but also grateful. If Langston hadn't tried to destroy us, we might have kept circling each other forever, too scared to actually try. In a weird way, he forced us to commit or walk away, and we chose each other." Cordelia kissed him, not caring that her lawyer was sitting in the front seat, pretending not to notice. "We should celebrate. Dinner somewhere nice. Maybe invite Jasper. Jasper's on a field trip today. Won't be home until late." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in weeks. "Even better. They ended up at the same small Brooklyn restaurant where they'd had their first real date months ago when everything was new and terrifying and uncertain. The owner recognized them and gave them the booth in the back, the same one they'd sat in before the world knew who they were or what they meant to each other. Over wine, Cordelia asked the question that would change everything. "Do you remember what you asked me that night about whether I regretted meeting you?" "I remember. You said no. I want to ask you the same question now. After everything, the scandal, the harassment, Langston trying to take Jasper, the trial, all of it. Do you regret meeting me?" Declan thought about it honestly, giving her the respect of real consideration rather than automatic reassurance. He thought about the jobs he'd lost, the invasion of privacy, the fear that had consumed him during the custody investigation, about the pain and uncertainty and constant pressure that had defined the past months. Then he thought about Cordelia reading bedtime stories to Jasper in voices that made his son laugh until he couldn't breathe. About her listening when he talked about his students, remembering their names, when she asked how his day went. About the way she'd stood by him when walking away would have been easier when protecting herself would have made more sense. About falling asleep next to someone who made him believe in futures that included happiness instead of just survival. "No, I don't regret it. Not for a second." "Good. Because I'm about to ask you something and I need you to know I'm asking because I want to, not because I feel obligated or guilty." His heart rate picked up, anticipation and nervousness mixing in his chest. "Okay." Cordelia took both his hands in hers, her grip firm and certain. "Move in with me, you and Jasper. Not because the apartment in Brooklyn isn't enough, but because I hate going to sleep without you. Because I love having Jasper's artwork on my refrigerator and his books scattered across my living room. Because I want us to be a family officially and completely." The proposal hit him like a wave, sweeping away every carefully constructed reason why this couldn't work, why people from their different worlds weren't supposed to build lives together. "Cordelia, that's a huge step. I know. And if you're not ready, I understand, but I am. I'm ready to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." "What about Jasper? This isn't just about us. If we do this and it doesn't work out, he's the one who gets hurt. Then we make sure it works out." Her eyes held his, unflinching and full of conviction. "We communicate. We're honest. We put his needs first and figure out everything else as we go." "Declan, I know you're scared. I know your experience has taught you that good things don't last. But I'm asking you to trust me. Trust us. Trust that what we have is strong enough to survive whatever comes next." Declan looked at this woman who'd given up so much already, who'd proven over and over that she wasn't going anywhere no matter how hard things got. "I need to talk to Jasper first. This affects him as much as us. If he's not comfortable, then we wait until he is. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as you need." That evening, after Jasper had come home from his field trip still buzzing with excitement about the Natural History Museum, Declan sat his son down for a conversation he'd been rehearsing in his head for hours. "Buddy, I need to talk to you about something important. You know how Ms. Thorne and I have been spending a lot of time together." Jasper looked up from the Lego spaceship he was building, his expression matter of fact. "Because she's your girlfriend." "Right. Well, she asked if we'd like to move in with her, into her apartment. What do you think about that?" Jasper's face scrunched up in the way it did when he was thinking hard about something important. "Would I still go to my same school?" "Yes. We'd get you there the same way we do now." "Would Mrs. Hastings still watch me sometimes?" "Absolutely. Nothing about your routine has to change except where we sleep." "Would I get my own room?" Declan smiled despite the nervousness churning in his stomach. "Yes, a bigger one than you have now, actually." Jasper was quiet for a long moment, building and rebuilding the same section of his spaceship while working through the implications with a seriousness that made him seem older than 5. "Is Ms. Thorne going to be like a mom?" The question was delivered in a small voice, and Declan felt his heart crack slightly. Jasper rarely talked about Emily, but the absence was always there, a hole in their family that nothing could quite fill. "She's not trying to replace your mom. Nobody could do that. But she cares about you a lot and she wants to be part of our family. Would that be okay with you?" Jasper fidgeted with the teddy bear that never left his side, the one Emily had given him before the cancer took her. I guess. I like her. She's nice to me and she doesn't lie. And she makes you smile more. I do. Yeah. Before Ms. Thorne, you were always tired and worried. Now you're still tired sometimes, but you smile more. I like when you smile. Declan pulled his son into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of children who noticed everything even when you thought they weren't paying attention. So we can try it. If you don't like it, we can always move back out and find our own place. This isn't permanent unless we all want it to be. Okay. Can I bring all my books? Every single one.